Here is why Kentucky's newspaper of record is saying that they could not endorse Paul. Quote, "The trouble with Dr. Paul is that despite his independent thinking, much of what he stands for is repulsive to people in the mainstream. For instance, he holds an unacceptable view of civil rights, saying that while the federal government can enforce integration of government jobs and facilities, private business people should be able to decide whether they want to serve black people or gays or any other minority group." All right? That's the quote. Now, what is the editorial board talking about when they say that? Does Rand Paul really think businesses should have the right to discriminate without government interference? Remember, not public facilities, just private facilities. A guy who owns a store or anything like that. All right, here is what he told the paper's editorial board himself.
Would you have voted for the Civil Rights Act of 1964?
I like the Civil Rights Act in the sense that it ended discrimination in all public domains, and I'm all in favor of that.
But?
You had to ask me the but. I don't like the idea of telling private business owners. I abhor racism. I think it's a bad business decision to ever exclude anybody from your restaurant. But at the same time, I do believe in private ownership. But I think there should be absolutely no discrimination in anything that gets any public funding. And that's most of what the Civil Rights Act was about, to my mind.
Let's continue. It's important to note it's not the only time that Paul has gone on the record with views similar to the ones he just expressed there. I want you now to listen to him on NPR just yesterday, as a matter of fact. Here he is.
You've said that business should have the right to refuse service to anyone, and that the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, was an overreach by the federal government. Would you say the same by extension of the 1964 Civil Rights Act?
What I've always said is that I'm opposed to institutional racism, and I would have, had I been alive at the time, I think, had the courage to march with Martin Luther King to overturn institutional racism, and I see no place in our society for institutional racism.
But are you saying that had you been around at the time, you would have hoped that you would have marched with Martin Luther King but voted with Barry Goldwater against the 1964 Civil Rights Act?
Well, actually, I think it's confusing on a lot of cases with what actually was in the Civil Rights case, because, see, a lot of the things that actually were in the bill, I'm in favor of. I'm in favor of everything with regards to ending institutional racism. So I think there's a lot to be desired in the civil rights. And to tell you the truth, I haven't really read all through it because it was passed 40 years ago and hadn't been a real pressing issue in the campaign on whether we're going to vote for the Civil Rights Act.
But it's been one of the major developments in American history in the course of your lifetime. I mean, do you think the 64 Civil Rights Act, or the ADA for that matter, were just overreaches in that business shouldn't be bothered by people with the basis in law to sue them for redress?
Right. I think a lot of things could be handled locally. For example, I think that we should try to do everything we can to allow for people with disabilities and handicaps. You know, we do it in our office with wheelchair ramps and things like that. I think if you have a two-story office and you hire someone who's handicapped, it might be reasonable to let them have an office on the first floor rather than the government saying you have to have a $100,000 elevator. And I think when you get to solutions like that, the more local the better, and the more common sense the decisions are rather than having a federal government make those decisions.
Mark Morial is the president of the National Urban League. He's dedicated to economic empowerment in urban communities. Mr. Morial, thanks for being with us, sir.
Thanks, Rick.
What do you make of the explanation that you just heard from the candidate? And I should add to that we have been monitoring comments from him throughout the course of the day. He doesn't seem to be taking it back or apologizing. He feels pretty strongly about it. And we should also add that we've invited him to come here and discuss this, and we're hoping if he can free some time in his schedule within the next couple of days that he will. What do you make of this?
Rick, it's a bizarre point of view. It's a retrogressive point of view. It indicates a degree of constitutional illiteracy to suggest that the Civil Rights Act should not apply to, quote, public accommodations. And I do believe that
you mean
when
private.
I heard it,
you misspoke. You mean private.
Public accommodations, private businesses which serve the public, which is the exact reason for the Civil Rights Act of 1964. One of its reasons was to extend to restaurants, to hotels, which are private businesses, but they serve the public. They have a license to serve the public, and they can't discriminate.
Let me just stop you and try and be as fair as I can to him and his perspective on this, which is, I go and buy a business. If I want to be foolish enough, because I don't think he's saying that it's smart business. In fact, I heard him say it's not smart business to do this. I also heard him say he doesn't believe in being prejudiced or being racist or discriminating against people. What he's saying is, as a true libertarian, anyone should have the right to do anything they want to do, even if it's stupid, even if it means taking away your own business and discriminating against people because they're white or black or green or whatever the heck they are. That's what he's saying.
He's misinterpreting what libertarianism is all about if he suggests that a person who owns a private business that serves the public can in fact discriminate against African Americans, Latinos, whites, people with disabilities, or any specific group of people on the account of race, creed, or national origin. This is a bizarre point of view.
But why is he wrong?
We've got to understand
why is he wrong?
He's wrong. He's wrong because, number one, the Supreme Court has decided this issue.
Fair enough.
That the Civil Rights Act can and should apply. Number two, he's wrong because he embraces a view of America which we put aside 50 years ago. We went through a difficult period, a civil rights period, to embrace the idea that this nation is a nation of all people. And I think to the extent that he embraces that point of view, he's embracing an outdated point of view which has long been discredited. He can't suggest I'd march with Dr. King, yet the very purpose of Dr. King's movement, which was to expand civil rights, he certainly does not support. So I think here's a candidate for the United States Senate, someone who could very well be in the Senate. So we've got to speak out and identify the fact that he's wrong as a matter of the Constitution, as a matter of law, and I think as a matter of libertarianism.
Okay, one final question to you. His point about business, that businesses should not be obstructed. They should not have their hands tied by the government constantly telling them what to do. I believe, from listening to him, that that's his major point. What do you make of that? We're down to 30 seconds.
What I make of that is that we in this nation afford to businesses license to operate. We have a balance between private business and, I think, the ability of government to protect people through public policy. I think it's an extremist point of view that no reasonable person embraces in the 21st century. And I do believe that it's so important that this be highlighted because he's embraced a point of view that's far out of the mainstream.
Thank you so much, Mark Morial, for joining us with your perspective on that. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you again. I want to show you something else now.